Thank you, Rabbi Schneeweiss, for joining us. It's an honor. Unfortunately, I don't have my co-host with me, but
Okay. I was wondering what happened to him.
yeah. He travels, so it's not always easy
Okay.
to come on, but it's really an honor. I discovered you fairly recently, and I'm a huge fan. I've been listening to your Stoicism podcast, which we'll get to after. But first, I want you to introduce yourself, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and yeah, take it away.
Okay, sure. All right, so I'll try to keep it brief here. So my name is Matt Schneeweiss. I grew up non-Jewish, converted to Judaism when I was in 11th grade. That's a whole story. If you're interested, I can send you. I did a video. I gave a talk to my guys in Yeshiva about that. So I started my Jewish education in Northwest Yeshiva High School in Seattle, and I had great teachers there. Both secular and Judaic. Fell in love with learning. The school has changed in the sense that none of the teachers who were part of my journey are there anymore. But I guess I'm supposed to use the, I get the sense I'm supposed to use like the word rationalism in here somewhere, even though I have a bone to pick with rationalism, but we can talk about that later.
What gave you that idea? No, actually,
yeah, right.
I have a bone to pick with it too, because it's definitely not an accurate term.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
right. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Yeah. So, but I guess I was virtually starting from my Aleph phase. Sorry, I am not going to be able to control my Ashkenazi pronunciation. Okay, so I don't know if you're going to like excommunicate me when this is done because I'm not using Sephardic.
No. Actually, I grew up in Ashkenazi schools my whole life. So when I interview Ashkenazis, sometimes it comes out.
Okay, you're bilingual. Yeah.
And I'm definitely more. It's fine. But you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so the school had a really good program with like starting. It was organized by level, not by grade. So I was able to start from the Aleph Beis and then work my way up. And along the way, I met a bunch of really, really good teachers. And when it came time to choose what yeshiva to go to, I just was, I was looking around at different possibilities. And I said, like, I just want to learn the way that these guys are learning, and ended up being that they were all associated with the same Yeshiva Bnei Torah in Far Rockaway. And so I went there immediately after high school. I was going to go to Israel, but this is when the second Intifada was very active, and I decided to go right to Yeshiva in Far Rockaway. Learned for 7 years there, got my a lot of good learning, and along the way got a degree, a bachelor's degree in psychology, master's degree from Azrieli in Jewish education. Started teaching high school. Along the way I discovered that I wanted to be a high school teacher, and taught high school for I had a good 13-year run before COVID changed things. And then I started working. I primarily taught at a girls' high school, College Shalhevet, high school for girls in North Woodmere. Closed somewhat as a result of COVID permanently, and then I got a job teaching in my Yeshiva Bnei Torah, and I now teach there full-time as a Rebbe and as an administrator, director of student learning. That's the very short, like Cliff Notes version, but yeah, I mean, I still identify as a high school teacher, even though it's now getting to the point where like it's been a couple years since I taught high school, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great yeshiva also. I know I've known Rabbi Chait I've been following him for a long time, and we are going to have some guests from the yeshiva coming on soon. But I want to hear more about
your Rebbe. Rabbi Maruf was your Rav?
Yes,
right.
He's my Rav.
Yeah, it's funny because I did not interact with him in the yeshiva, but what happened was in 2007, I started my first blog. And this is when Jewish blogging was, big, like the blogosphere. I don't know if you remember that era.
Yeah, of course.
Was that?
Of course I remember that.
Yeah, right. So I don't remember who discovered who, but somehow I met Rabbi Maruf and then became friends with him. And I still to this day, I think I've only interacted with him in person maybe once or twice, but we became good friends and met a lot of good people through internet, through Facebook and other stuff also. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to hear more about, like, obviously you don't want to go fully into it, but how did you, what turned you on to Judaism to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. And again, just to clarify, it's not that I don't want to go into it, it's that it's almost its own story, which I happen to have a YouTube video about, which I can refer you to, but I'll tell you the moment was, so the factual background is that my dad was born Jewish but raised completely secular, almost completely secular. His parents were secular Reformed Jews, and then my mom was not Jewish. And our family, through a certain series of meetings with different people, different influences, were essentially Baalei Tshuva. And at a certain point, I found out that, unlike the Reform movement, which said that you're Jewish if one parent is Jewish, I grew up thinking I was Jewish, and then halakhically, once we found Orthodox Judaism, I realized that halakhically I wasn't Jewish. So it was my conversion was almost a technicality in that sense. Like, we were just becoming religious anyway, and then we're talking over the course of years. However, the big moment was really not my decision to convert. It was my decision to enroll in the Yeshiva High School, because we were living in this town in the middle of the desert in Eastern Washington called Yakima, with technically there was a Reformed temple, but there was no Orthodox Jewish presence, and even the Reformed temple didn't even have a rabbi. And we were already involved in the Orthodox community, and we would go to Seattle every once in a while. And there was this Shabbaton hosted by the Seattle Kollel, and I was I was a very shy kid. I think this was between 9th and 10th grade when we had the Shabbaton, and a very shy kid, barely talked to kids who I didn't know. And here are these modern Orthodox kids who I didn't know, normal kids. And when I say normal, just picture all the things. Are they this extreme, that extreme? No, normal. They wore no more clothes, talked about movies and sports. But for the entire Shabbaton, they're talking excitedly about their learning, and about they were talking about philosophy, from the Judaic classes. They were talking about analysis of history from their history classes. And, I was a very academically successful student, straight A, but all I cared about was grades. I had never been exposed to love of learning. And this interaction with these kids was my first exposure. And they just exuded, love of learning. And then on Rosh Hashanah of my 10th grade year, when we were still in Yakima, I told my parents I want a Jewish education at this school, and I'll stay with another family in Seattle if I have to. And, my dad had already been to the point where he wanted to move to a Jewish community, but he didn't want to force anything on the family. My mom as well. And so we all kind of made the decision that I would finish 10th grade in public school in Yakima, and then we would move. And then that's really when I started the conversion process as well. And
your whole family did it.
Yeah. That's one of the things I'm very grateful for, is that my family, we all kind of took this journey to Judaism together, each one taking a different step at different times.
Wow.
So that's
You went from Yakima to Yarmulke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's very funny because, it was a bizarre experience that, I was in Yakima is this very heavily evangelical Christian community. And I, in my 10th grade year, was wearing a yarmulke. They'd never seen that before. And then, so I became identified as Jewish. And there were a couple teachers who insinuated, or in one case outright accused me of killing Jesus, your people kill Jesus. But then when I joined the high school here, I was not halakhically Jewish, and the Rav who was overseeing my conversion said I can't put on tefillin until I actually convert. I'm not sure what his basis for that was, but so I like to say I went from being the only Jew in a completely non-Jewish school to the only non-Jew in a completely Jewish school, and that was a very bizarre experience. And the experience of being in a Jewish school, are you a Harry Potter fan at all?
Not really. My wife is a fan, but
okay, fine. So you know that there's the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Hogwarts,
Sure.
Right? So it felt like going to Hogwarts because there were these, everyone in the school was familiar with everything, but all of this mitzvah stuff is new. Classes in thinking, in analyzing stuff, it was and they're all speaking about it as though it's normal because it's normal as Jews. And then this school happened to be a very thought-oriented school. And that's to circle back around to your question. This school was really focused on producing independent critical thinkers, and it was an Orthodox Jewish school, but kids came from all sorts of backgrounds, so not all the kids who came in were coming from religious homes, but everyone learned an approach to Judaism that was focused on things making sense and on clarity and on, intellectual honesty and investigation. And that was the Judaism I was immersed in. And I didn't know anything different. And to a certain extent, I went from there to my yeshiva, for 7 years. And then from there, essentially to a high school that was started by one of the first alumni of my yeshiva, and there were lots of teachers in the school. They're from associated with my yeshiva, and then I'm now teaching in my yeshiva. So I'm very sheltered in the sense that I've really primarily been exposed to a Judaism that focuses on clear and rational thinking. And again, I avoid using the term rationalism mostly because I'm very suspicious of isms and labels and rigid ways of thinking.
But Judaism, that's
even Judaism. I mean, Shomer Torah and Mitzvot, Shomer Torah and Halacha. That's a.
But again, we say these things because it's just easier. It's part of the
right,
accepted nomenclature. So
what it reminds me of is I remember the first time I saw on a it was probably a Shadchan site, Saw You at Sinai or something. They have the drop down menu of what type of kippah you wear, and there were 5 choices, and I didn't wear any of those. I wore something else, and I didn't even know at that point what the significance was of you wear a velvet, you keep us through God, it's different implications. And that's kind of how I feel if I had to use a drop down menu of what labels would you associate yourself with as a Jew, I would say modern Orthodox rationalist, maybe Maimonidean, but I hate the term rationalist. I hate the term Maimonidean. Sure. Modern Orthodox, I just don't, I don't hate the term. I just I don't know if anyone knows what that means anymore, I
have a solution. Just call yourself Sephardi. That's it.
I know. So that's the thing is that, and I don't say this with any disrespect to Ashkenazim, in my so this is a fortunate thing. All right, let me tell you the regret and then the fortunate thing. So the regret is, I think if I could do it over again, then I think I definitely would have chosen to be Sephardic for many reasons, which I'm not going to go into. But the lucky thing is that the shul that we moved close to here in a suburb of Seattle in Mercer Island is the shul that is it's Orthodox. It's run by a Chabad rabbi, and it was a mixture of different people. So they had yeshivish, they had Sephardim, and the whole thing was whoever leads davening, does that minhag and that nusach. And so there was no minhag kavua in our shul. And so I kind of got to take whatever minhagim I brought back from my yeshiva or from my own learning. And our shul rav was applauding, everyone doing their own minhag. And then that gave me a certain freedom, which I definitely enjoyed, especially in my youth,
There's a lot of beauty to that. And listen, I go to a Sephardic shul where, first of all, for those who are listening, the Sephardic shuls most of them that you'll go to are very open to different types of levels of observance. So for example, in my row, there's a black hatter, and then there's a guy who probably drives to shul. And there's no, we don't really discriminate in terms of how they observe, because we all just are united based on our religious and our communal backgrounds, more so than anything else. And I think it's a very beautiful thing. You won't find reform or conservative Sephardic communities.
They didn't go through the same historical trajectory as Ashkenazim that had such a rigid split.
Right. And so this is actually if you want to identify with something, the easiest way to say, I guess, is to say you're Sephardi in your outlook, because it sounds like you are. And I have the same problem with rationalism or Maimonideanism, but for lack of a better term, it's just easier to use that term. The thing is, we always have to explain ourselves to those who are again, a lot of quote unquote Maimonideans do not like the term rationalism, but we spend 20 minutes explaining it.
Right.
So just let's just make our lives easier and call ourselves rationalists.
Right.
But actually, what you were saying before about Jewish education, I think the building blocks that you got, and that, first of all, it sounds unbelievable, but I feel like that should be put back into the school system. Back in the day, they used to teach curriculum logic, right?
Right.
They don't have that anymore, and I feel like you need that before anything else. But it's interesting how things change. And I wanted to ask you something about your fast